Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Krakow Film Festival. That's great to have you all here. I would like to introduce you our guests, the members of the International Documentary Competition jury. The chairperson Łukasz Żal, who is the Polish cinematographer and is famous for his collaboration with Paweł Pawlikowski, but also for documentaries. Hi, Łukasz. We have also two other filmmakers with us, Eva Mulvat. Hello, Eva.
Hi.
Eva has her film in the festival section focused on Denmark, and the film is called A Modern Man. Todd Landing, hello, Todd. Todd is
hello, Anita.
And he has also his film at this festival, but in another competition section, doc film music, and the film is called Soul and Rabbis Holocaust Survivor Band. And last but not least, Martin Horina. Welcome, Martin.
Hello.
Martin is from the Czech Republic and he's a film critic and a festival programmer. We are all at a very special time. Our meeting takes place in a very difficult and complicated and uncertain situation for all of us. The pandemic has changed a lot of in our lives, in our activities. So I would like to ask you individual questions about what's going on specifically in your life from the perspective of documentary filmmaking. How do you perceive this change? What is going on? So maybe I will start from Todd, who is not only a director of documentaries, but also an independent producer. Could you tell us, Todd, about how you perceive it, this change, and the year's future?
So I'm not good at predicting things that are going to happen in the future. I very much stay in the moment. I don't have a crystal ball, but from this is a very difficult question that you ask right now, because as we speak, the industry is changing, and distribution is changing, and the festival circuits, how that's running, and the theatrical market is all changing. I asked my distributor, Samuel Goldwyn Films. I don't self-distribute my films. I'm more focused on producing films, and so once a film is finished, it's always a mystery to me as to what road is this film going to take. And so I thought, talking to my distributor, they would really have a handle on where things are going to be going. And they said the same thing. They said, we absolutely don't know. We don't know how the platforms are going to change. We don't know how the content is going to need to change. The question is the audience. What is the audience going to be looking for? And the funders respond to that. So there's all different, there's a million different ways to fund a film here. The foundations, which have been big funders of American, more pure documentary, foundations like the Ford Foundation, Sundance Institute, MacArthur Foundation, I could go on. Their philanthropic focus probably hasn't changed and will not change. I mean, they're focused on philanthropy. They are focused on funding films that will have some kind of social impact. Now, when you move over so I think that will stay the same, but then you look at the big streaming platforms, Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Apple, and they're very audience driven. They're looking at what attracts their audience. So they're very into series now. It's all, some of it's borderline reality TV. They're very focused on films that are going to move, that are going to have a strong dramatic structure. I would imagine that's going to continue. I noticed, just looking at our films in our category, I felt like the European films are very, at this point, very driven on verite, without using much voiceover, without putting too much focus on dramatic arcs, making a story move. The Europeans are more comfortable allowing scenes to extend over a period of time. Whereas in the US, I mean, the audience would lose their attention very quickly. They'd want the film to move faster. So the long and short of it is I don't have a clear answer. We're in a place where we'll have to see what happens.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah.
What do you think about it from your perspective of the filmmaker?
Yeah, I will speak more about how it's been influencing my practical work with my new films, because I've been in a time where I just finished, for the last 3 years, I finished a long body of work and finished 3 films in the last 3 years. So I was in a place where I took like half a year out to follow out my new film, Love Child, that has been touring around the world. And so in January, I was starting to look at new things and trying to figure out what to do next. And that has definitely been influenced by the lockdown, because I was opening up as the world was locking down. So it's been a tendency for a long time in the documentary business to discuss how we should work around the fact that we also travel a lot when we go to festivals and when we go out shooting in the world to do international documentary films. And environmentally, we can not just say we can go around the world all the time, but other people cannot pollute. So that has been like an issue anyway before Corona. And there's been another discussion about what is actually our stories. Can we go to the other end of the world to tell their stories as white Western people, or should people from their own culture tell their own stories? So that's been the two, like environmental and a cultural kind of exchange that you have to be, that's been a tendency to discuss. You have to tell your own stories and not the other culture's stories. So I think both of those discussions has been around. And with the coronavirus, that has definitely put more pressure on finding solutions for that. So right now I'm forced to stay more at home, and I'm researching for stories that are more within Denmark or the Nordic Scandinavian countries, because that I think is going to be what we know we can do for the next couple of years. And I'm working on a project right now that where we try to work with other crews, local crews in different countries, to that way to kind of approach an international story, but not shot only by me, but by like a group of people who can tell their local story in their local environment, and we can gather them. So that's the way it's like quite like practically has changed for me.
Okay, thank you. For Łukasz, I have a special question about this change. I mean the human contact, the change in terms of the human contact, because it's something which is very important in documentary film making, to be close to the person on the other side of the camera. Sometimes the distance is profiting, but I would like to know your opinion, how you see it, not in terms of the communication between the members of the crew, but just the communication between the filmmaker and this person who brings her emotions, brings her private life in front of the camera. Do you think that something may be changed in this issue?
I don't think so, because I mean, I don't know yet, because I haven't been working for 3 months, so I don't know how it will look like. But I think, like Michel Houellebecq, his sentence that, you know, everything will be the same but worse. So a little bit worse. And I don't think so. It will change a lot. I mean, if we will decide to make a movie, we will have to work like in the same way as we were working. I think, you know, we'll use masks and all those procedures, but I think everything will look quite similar. And yeah, I mean, it's really hard to predict. But but I think it will look like quite similar. I think it won't change, because, you know, if you if you need, it's like, you know, it's like you're living with somebody. So when you're making documentary or not documentary, feature film, it's you are very close to the person, and it's like with your friend, it's like with a family almost. So you know, it's like, I think it won't change really. I mean, if you like I'm here in the village now, and you know, we're just contacting with people, with neighbors, with friends. We're just contacting very like normally. So I think it will look like this when you have to be close with somebody. I mean, you won't, it won't change anything. I think so.
You are optimist.
Excuse me, could
You
you
are
repeat?
optimist. Not just Welbeck. You are optimist.
Yeah, I'm optimist. Yeah, yeah, but you know, I would like to. I would like that it will change something. Maybe we will, because I think maybe this time we could use for just thinking more and just stop and having more time to, you know, to look at things, at the world. But I'm afraid it won't change a lot. I'm afraid we will just come back to this rush and everything will be the same, but just a little bit worse.
Thank you. I would like to refer to something what Todd just said to us about this change in distribution of documentaries, because now we are online more than ever, and the streaming platforms stream tons of films, also documentaries, which is great because they can reach us, and this is the positive aspect of this situation. But I would like to ask Martin about the risk, the certain risk that appears. I mean that it may be a risk that all those great films, all those great documentaries, maybe stuck in this virtual space, maybe not forever, but for a certain time, and it will be another stage of this lockdown for documentary filmmaking. That films that are intended to be screened on the big screens will be stuck in internet.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to somehow relate to, because it's pretty much the same what Todd said, that now it's a bit early to really know what does it mean for a film to go this production way, this distribution way, start on VODs at this point. We don't know what does it exactly mean to premiere at online events. I would love to have a crystal ball. Like our festival, working for Karlovy Vary Film Festival, we have a crystal ball as our award, but I don't have one to say this, because also in terms of festival, for me it's very difficult to talk in detail about other ways of spreading films to world and distribution of VOD, because of course I don't really know the mechanisms of monetization there in detail. It would be good to have someone really who is knowledgeable in this area. But for festivals, we ourselves don't really know how will we see the situation in a few months, in a year, and we sometimes get quite obvious and for us difficult questions in terms of what does it mean if a film screens online for you, for a hypothetical possible future showing at your festival. How does the whole online thing changes the premiere policy? But there is no precedent, and as we speak, we are deciding. So in our case of Karlovy Vary International Film Festival, you might know we canceled the festival, so of course it affected us immensely. We decided to replace it by event around the Republic to show 16 films. So older films without premiere, mostly, just to show them to audiences, but in cinemas, because we felt, okay, that's the way how to do that. But for the next year, we don't really know how will we treat all those films, because the discussion is about to start. It's difficult, but of course, we try to be open to help the films which were forced to basically start their career in such environment. there is no good or bad decisions. You have to take a decision, some decision, because your film is finished and maybe it's not possible to wait or whatever. So we will try to be open, but I don't have any direct answers concerning this. And I think this is the most frustrating thing for filmmakers, because they are taking decisions, but they don't see where they can lead, because the structure is not there yet. Some of my friends asked me, like friends, producers, filmmakers asked me, okay, so should we go for the online screening of this kind or that kind? And I said, my answer is I don't know, because it's really up to you to try to figure out whether it makes sense from certain point of view or not. Yeah, so it's not very helpful, but I think it's better to somehow express that it's just being written, what will happen with the films, and not to overload you with opinions, because as I talk to other festivals and sales agents and other professions in the sphere of film industry, those people are trying to get the information just now and they are deciding.
And what do you think about the audience? Because some say that, and they are pessimists, that the audience will become even more escapist after pandemic, which is natural after some kind of trauma. But some other people say that, on the contrary, that the viewers will be more non-fiction oriented, more conscious, more documentary oriented. I know that we are not psychologists, we are not prophets, but how could you relate to this issue of the audience? Todd?
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you were asking Martin that question. Yeah, I think this is a fascinating experiment that we're in right now. I mean, maybe that's a more hopeful way for me to look at it, because there are parts of this that are so unbelievably depressing. What will the audience be looking for? I mean, again, who can predict? I can speak personally and say that this is, I kind of wanted to bounce off of what Eva was saying, because Eva answered the question on a more personal level as a filmmaker, how this has affected her work. I mean, for me, my work has always been longitudinal, meaning I follow people over years. I get close to them. I'm in their homes. When I'm filming, I'm physically close to them. It's all about intimacy, my films, and this has just blown me out of the water. I mean, I've just tried to. Right now, I have no desire to go out and film. I've turned down a couple of assignments that would have put me in a vulnerable situation without proper PPE, without proper protection. That's another thing, is a lot of the broadcasters and people that are still funding films, a lot of them are not providing the protection that you should have when you go out there. So it's left me questioning what to do, and I've actually turned to writing. As far as what the audience is going to look for and how that would change, and depending on where you live, and if you're in the US or you're in Europe, who knows? I think it could go both ways. I think people for sure are going to want uplifting stories. I mean, again, just in viewing our films, I found that the difficult stories were all the more difficult for me to watch because of the situation we're in. And I was really looking for hopeful stories. So I think it's fair to say, and I talk to my friends, I talk to my colleagues, I mean, we all feel the same. So, I mean, what percentage of the population does that represent? I don't know. But I think documentaries will certainly still be very much in demand. People very much want that. And if it's a real story, a true story, a documentary story that has some hope, I just think that those will be incredibly popular and in demand, is my feeling.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone who would like to add something to this?
I can say Denmark has been quite like touched upon on a very smooth, easy way by the coronavirus. We have been locked down, but not been locked into our houses. So it's been almost normal. Kids out of school, people at home working from home and stuff like that. And for the last month or so, it's been opening up quietly again. And now it's almost back to normal. I live in the center of Copenhagen. People are like flocking in the sun, eating in front of the restaurants again. So my point of view is that, of course, this will sit with us in our minds for a long time. But I also feel that we are comfortable creatures. Human beings want to have fun. They want to go out again. And in a country like mine, where we haven't been hardly hit by the death of this virus, and we of course been hit by the economical consequences, but people still have the taste of life and they want to get entertained. And I mean, people say this is a lot of discussion about the future and we don't know, but we know that people need to get entertained. Otherwise they will get bored and they will start going into war or whatever. So I think entertainment business has been difficult for the last many years. It's the art house as documentaries has been under a lot of pressure and a lot of change, and we still are, and I don't think that will change. But we have an opportunity in terms of trying to provide relevant entertainment that has more depth and has more thought to bring to our audience. And I think we have to fight for that. And it's not always the market supporting this, but I definitely think that we should keep on trying to find the right road, and that the audience is out there, and definitely in the international scale it's there. Maybe not in my country where like 5 million people cannot really run a fruitful business for advanced documentary cinema. But what you two guys do, like keeping these festivals going and the community in an international level, I think it's important that we kind of try to just find our way into the future and keep the discussions and that way looking for new possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair. I just want to add real quickly to what Eva said. This is really interesting because we are, depending on what country you're from and what your country is going through, I think is going to deeply impact what the audience is going to be looking for. And I have to say, I mean, the US, it's just unbelievable. Besides having the record number of deaths, we have a leader that is just horrifying. I mean, he's scarier than the disease itself. And it leaves so many Americans like myself just unbelievably hopeless, thinking, oh my God, is this going to happen again? We don't even know if we're going to be able to get this guy out of here. So we're in a really, really bad place. And like I said, the way the whole pandemic has been handled here, I mean, it's like we're a third world country. We never could have imagined this. It's unbelievable. And the circus continues. It just every day we hear more and more insane things coming from our so-called president, leader. It's horrible.
Oh.
We are in quite similar situation, I think, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe let's come back to the documentary filmmaking, because what we've been observing, at least in Poland, but I think that not only in our country, for a few weeks or a few months, is an intensified activity or creativity of documentary filmmakers who catch their cameras and try to capture what's going on, this atmosphere, the specific atmosphere of this time. And so there are a lot of homemade projects, individual or collective ones, and it's great news that business is going on, at least on this level. And of course, it may be only a sad necessity of our times, but I wonder if this kind of activity may influence documentary filmmaking itself. Maybe it's a kind of, I don't know, the breath of the fresh air. How do you see it?
Yeah, maybe as an interesting fact, I would mention that with our activities for summer, one of them is also presenting to film professionals upcoming films, like fiction and documentary ones. And among the 100 documentary films, there already were 3 films about lockdown, basically really shot during last 2 months. So the reaction of the filmmakers is really fast. But it depends. It applies for any film. No single film is about the topic, solely about the topic. It's about how it's treated, how its style cooperates with the content. But in this case, of course, more let's say like basic techniques are totally fine and fun. But yeah, there will be a number of films about it, which will be maybe coming up in autumn and next spring. But we can more think about whether this won't be the overused topic in those coming months, because it's very difficult to make a film in confined environment. One of the most difficult tasks, like really in interiors, simple film. It's you all the filmmakers know it. Like once you are in a room and you are spending there the whole time, find the right angles in this simple environment. It's immensely difficult because you don't have space for anything. So it's about the angle, about the ideas, about the rhetorics. And I'm really looking forward if there will be any film, and I hope there will be, which will treat it with the feel of fresh air, because it's extremely difficult. But you might know some of the like lockdown films from the past years, which were not dealing with Corona anyhow. Maybe with lockdown, which was the decision of the person itself. So you might know there are good examples of brilliant films like that. One of them started in Venice this year, Tumiriki. So let's see.
And how do you see it from the perspective of festival programming? I'm just asking you, Martin.
Yeah.
Because I have to say that we, as the Krakow Film Festival, are a little bit afraid, a little bit worried that during the next year edition, we will have tons of so-called Corona documentaries. And of course, it's just a natural impulse that this trauma should be expressed. And but on the other hand, from the perspective of festival programming, it's still a risk that it will be a little bit monothematic. How do you perceive it from your perspective of festival programmer?
Like when we are talking about documentaries, we're always saying we do not care what the film is about. Not in a way that we wouldn't care about what is it about actually, but that's not the reason why for us to like or dislike the film. And there are many other reasons. Of course, you have to feel that the film is able to express something, but I personally, I'm not afraid. I'm more like looking forward, because I think there might be something coming out of this. But with any topic which comes all around the world at the same time, similar situation was with the start of like migration crisis. There were many formulaic films really following the same patterns, not really interesting in terms of craft and following the same narratives. Of course, you get bored watching those films, but I'm sure there will be interesting author views on that. And I think also people got a bit relaxed, many of them during the lockdown, and some of them are trying to see it with the humor. And I think that's a great opportunity. Like once you feel that you relieve stress a bit, maybe it's very difficult, but I saw people around me who experience such development, like personal development. And I think for a filmmaker who is like desperate and in the end something like that after relief comes out of it, it can be refreshing. Let's see.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And what about Todd and Eva? Do you think that this situation may be a kind of inspiration just for you as filmmakers, documentary filmmakers?
Well, actually, I was under the lockdown looking into whether we could describe it somehow. I think like many other documentary people. And because sometimes when you live in a kind of organized country like Denmark and you deal with an international documentary business, it tends to be difficult for us with not big issues or war going on in our backyards to be relevant if we have to compete on drama. So we thought, well, now it's happening here, it's happening everywhere, in every country. So now we have history just around our corners. But it's not, I don't think that we can work, we are not journalists and we don't work with day-to-day actual issues. We need to have the relevance and the bigger, more existential stuff running for us if we have to make long documentary films that can stand over time. And I've been trying to look into the themes that this crisis bring up, and I think that can be different. It's definitely different from Utah in America than it is for us. And it might bring different questions out, but I think that's those questions that I'm looking for, is a more existential, long-term discussions that will come after this, because the journalists will they have already run ahead with every possible angle on the daily things happening, and that's not our job.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree. I totally agree. When I think about developing a new project, I want to make sure that I'm looking at a story, looking at an angle, looking at a theme that has not been covered ad nauseum by the news world. I mean, that's the last thing people need to see in a documentary. Something that they start watching and they're like, I know this, I've seen this. So yeah, it's the deeper, as Eva said, existential questions, I think, that I'm wrestling with. I think, the long-term post-traumatic effect of this is going to be interesting. And then I'm interested in, trying to find stories that may be more metaphorical and less on the nose in terms of this issue, the situation that we're in. There could be some very interesting stories that don't relate directly to the pandemic, but have themes and issues within the story that are relatable to the pandemic. So it's hard to find these stories, especially now. It's hard to research right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe let's come back to the Krakow Film Festival. This edition, you have a certain idea what's going on in the competition as jury members. And I'm not going to ask you about your preferences, about any details, because you will know them on Saturday during the awards ceremony. But I would like to know your general impression on what's going on in the competition, what kind of trends, what kind of topics have you noticed, And because I sometimes think that all those films that were selected before pandemic and made before pandemic, they are just today a kind of letters, postcards from a completely different world. But maybe I'm wrong, maybe not always. So let's try to pay attention also on this issue of the competition films. Łukasz?
So I don't think there are like postcards from the different world. I'm afraid that they're just, I mean, they're just showing that it's not so good with our world. They're like, there's a lot of, I mean, for me, I mean, I'm just seeing a lack of hope in those films, a lot of those films. And so I think that's kind of a very strong emotion for me. And also having, I mean, in a lot of those films, I see that there's no solution. I mean, I see there's so many problems and we are trapped in such a complicated situations with our world, with politics, with, I mean, conditions that people are living, and there's not so much hope and there's not so much solution for this. I mean, personally, my feeling that every day when I was watching those films, I was like in the evening, I had a feeling that it's not so good, and it wasn't good before pandemic, and it wasn't good. I mean, so that's my feeling.
Mm-hmm. Eva?
Well, for me, it's interesting in this selection to come a bit closer to Eastern Europe. I think that's gives a lot of taste of what is happening in Russia and Poland. That is not so present all the time in a lot of the other selections that I've seen around the world in different festivals. And definitely you have a certain taste for beauty and the poetic misery in a way. And I was admired that in your work and in your culture. We have seen many changes just in our lives. You come out of one system, the communistic system, and into the more Western system. But I always felt that there has been a cultural legacy that has run in the Eastern European culture. And I feel that is present in many of the films here. A kind of intellectual background. You read books, you know about classical music. You have that vibe is still here, even in the very, like Łukasz says, it's like kind of it's not upbeat stories, but it's still there. There's a kind of a Weltschmerz, they say in Germany, but it's quite beautiful. I really enjoyed that. As Todd also mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of the films that are more like state of mind stories and visual experiments than they are actually mainstream plot orientated stories. And that can be good or bad, but it's interesting to see them in this amount. That's not what we usually meet on our television stations or on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. Martin?
I'm sorry.
Łukasz?
No, I just wanted to add something. It's kind of
yes, that's great.
Talking about the Russia state of mind, yeah, because it's a lot of things about Russia, and it's amazing that, I mean, that's so strong, and that's so I just wanted to add. Yeah.
Yes, it was just coincidence, but yes, you are right. Martin?
When I was thinking about it, I realized there is a quite strong element of visual anthropology in the selection. Like most often, it's very difficult to find like a silver line in such a selection. Like festivals are selecting various kinds of films, which they feel bringing topics which are meant to be a bit different, to make somehow interesting mix in this sense. But here I felt that the humans are in the middle of everything, and their environment is very, very strong element in the films. As Eva said, it's quite a lot of the films are talking about the region of Eastern Europe, which sometimes traveling there and looking how people live there can be a bit desperate somehow. But I feel in this sense, like the visual anthropology element is something which binds quite a lot of films, not all of them, but I feel in this sense the selection is very human. I feel there is not so many films which would be, let's say, like more experimental in abstract sense, and in all of the films, in the center of the plot are people.
Todd?
I thought it was an interesting selection of different styles of filmmaking. Without naming any names, I mean, you had one that was 100% archival of footage, and you had some that were pure verite. You had some that were using combinations of dramatic elements and verite. You had one that seemed very, very staged, but had its own aesthetic that was very consistent throughout, and was visually strong, but was kind of a hybrid verite, I guess. But in terms of so I think, as in most documentary festivals, I mean, I agree with Martin, with what Martin said about, the human being at the center. I feel like almost every festival has that in documentaries. Of course, some are, could be more focused on historical stories, but there's always the human being at the core of it. And that is certainly in this festival, without a doubt. And as Lucas said, the overriding emotion that I really struggled with was the sadness of so many of these stories, the sense of hopelessness. Not in every single one, but there was an arc, I felt, of sadness and hopelessness. And I noticed I had to keep myself in check in watching it, because I know that part of this is the context that we're living in. It's impossible to watch films without, I think, acknowledging the context that we live in. And it was hard. It was hard. I had to really battle myself not to just turn off some of these films because I was finding it too depressing. But I think it's certainly an interesting mix of films.
Mm-hmm. So do you agree with Eva that those films appeal also to us today, that they are not only archives of this world from before pandemic? Do you find those films appealing today to you?
I do, but pardon me?
In this specific time?
Yes, and I have to say that in addition to some of the stories being very difficult to watch because of the material, it was sad. There was a sadness in looking back at how things were, where we could gather as families and be in groups and be close to each other. And there was I certainly felt a sadness and missing that and wondering when will we have that back? When will we be able to have big gatherings with friends and celebrations and things like that? So yeah, it was hard.
Actually, I in this sense agree with what Luca said. I wish those were postcards from a different world, but unfortunately they are not. In this sense, what we all experience, which is quite often somehow defined by the state regulations and current media content, it doesn't mean our world is as itself is so different. And also I have to mention that, of course, we are living differently for a few months, but still it's not such long time. It's not eternity, and in some countries it slowly comes back, and now we see that not so many things change. Maybe how we think about certain things changed a bit, but the problems our world deals with are still there. They haven't disappeared. Like, how would they? Maybe one of them, that we are not now flying, somehow disappeared. Part of the over tourism. I live really in the center of the Prague, so that disappeared for some time, but they disappear because they had to. But it's more about what we do now.
Mm-hmm. Łukasz?
And also, but I mean, sorry, I mean, we're just talking about the same question, yeah? I mean,
yes, still about.
So, I mean, and also what is for me very, very significant in this selection, it's like also, you know, the topic of Russia. And I mean, that's amazing. That's, I mean, just, you know, there's few films which just shows the same problem, you know, about Russia, that there's so much stupidness. I mean, there's I mean, that this, and also what Eva said, that this system and in the communist system, I mean, it influenced people so much that even now it's so hard and to live there. And I mean, and it's also what is very, and I noticed this in a few movies, even more than in few, that, you know, the people, it's interesting about the people that they're getting older, that the people are so immature that they're getting older, but I mean, they have children, but they just so immature and nothing changed with people. They having children, but they're not able to give them any tools to live better, to just the poor people will be more poor, and, you know, people who have money will be more wealthy. And it's a lot of interesting topics, and the selection is very, very, I mean, I really enjoy. It's hard to say enjoy, because it wasn't enjoying, and it was sometimes very sad and painful, but it was very interesting. And even films which, I mean, almost every film gave me something, and it was like, I mean, I'm having a neighbors, and I just every day just talking about them what I saw today, because it's like there's so many amazing stories. And yeah, so I mean, great. I really like the selection.
Okay. So we have to finish our conversation in a moment. I would like to ask you to finish it with some optimistic accent. So please give your personal message to the audience of the festival, to the filmmakers from the competition section, and not only from the whole sections. What would you say just at the beginning of the festival? Todd?
Oh, thanks, Anita. I would say to the filmmakers, keep going. You know, don't stop. There's a huge demand. The upside of what's happening here is there is a huge demand for interesting content, and I do believe if you come up with an interesting story and interesting characters, and you will find a place for your project. So more and more people are streaming, and the platforms are looking for content. Yes, the competition is huge, but if you have something strong, I believe it will find its place. So that's something hopeful and optimistic. I do believe we'll come out of this situation eventually, and I think things will be the way they'll be. They won't be what they were, And I would encourage the audience to continue to watch and support and love documentaries. They're important, and they give us an insight, I think, into our human condition that no other art form can do. So please keep watching documentaries.
Thank you. Eva?
Well, I've been in the business for quite a long time, and I sometimes lose my faith in storytelling, because it can be kind of fluffy what comes out of it. You use many years in creating something, and then it's out there, and what does it really change, and what can we really change? But then sometimes when I go into a cinema, and I feel so enlightened by somebody else's works. Somebody used like years to go into depth with their stories, and it feels like I get almost like I read a PhD on something just within 1.5 hours. I'm so well educated, or I have had such a profound experience in an artistic way coming out of somebody else's work. So I would say I think stories matters, and I think that we should sit through a lot of really bad ones to sometimes meet the real ones that really to you makes a difference. So keep on watching also through the bad stuff.
Thank you. Martin?
For me, it's simple. I think I would definitely encourage all the audiences to watch films. We all wish the festival would keep the usual shape, but it's always better to watch the film than not to watch it. So it's not our decision to show the films in this way, but yeah, be open to what you see, be critical. It's okay to dislike films, but it's good to give them a chance and not to judge them too early, which especially in online environment can be a bit tricky, because some films are meant to be seen in cinemas, can be a bit vulnerable in such a virtual environment. So give them the chance they deserve, because I think it's worth it, but it's more difficult now.
Mm-hmm. And Łukasz?
As I said, that films are not easy, but from the other hand, I think that I would like to just encourage the audience, and just I think it's important to watch them, because there's so many mirrors which we can reflect in those films. And I don't know how much films can change, but I think it's so important just to watch those things and about those problems, and because I think that it can change a lot in ourselves, and I think it can change a lot in the world. So I think that I just wish great watching, and yeah, so many great films.
Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for your job.
Thank you.
Jury.
Thank you.
Hardworking. And thank you to all of you who were here with us during this meeting, and have a good time during the festival. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ceremony.
Bye-bye.
Bye.